The day began like any other for Maya, a seasoned flight attendant who had been flying for over a decade. She arrived at the airport early, her uniform freshly pressed and her hair neatly tied back. The morning sun cast golden rays through the terminal windows as passengers hurried to their gates, dragging suitcases behind them or clutching coffee cups to stay awake. Maya loved this part of her job, the hustle and bustle of travel, the sense of adventure that came with each new flight. But little did she know today would be unlike any other day in her career. As she boarded the plane, Maya greeted her colleagues warmly before heading to the first-class section. This was where the most demanding passengers sat, business executives, celebrities, and wealthy travelers who expected nothing short of perfection. Maya didn't mind. She prided herself on providing top-notch service no matter what. With practiced ease, she started preparing the cabin, ensuring everything was spotless and ready for boarding. Soon enough, the passengers began filing in. Among them were two men dressed in expensive suits, their polished shoes clicking against the aisle floor. They took their seats near the front, already exuding an air of superiority. From the moment they settled in, Maya could tell they weren't going to make her job easy. One of them raised his hand almost immediately, signaling her over with an impatient wave. "Yes, sir?" Maya asked politely, offering her warmest smile despite sensing the tension brewing. "I'll have a gin and tonic," he said curtly, barely looking up from his phone. His tone wasn't rude yet, but there was something dismissive about the way he spoke, as if he thought he was doing her a favor by acknowledging her presence. "Of course," Maya replied, jotting down his order. She turned to the second man, who smirked faintly, as if sharing some private joke with his companion. "And for you, sir." "Water. Make sure it's cold," he replied, his voice dripping with sarcasm. Maya nodded, unfazed by their attitude. Over the years, she'd encountered all kinds of passengers, some kind, some difficult, and she'd learned not to take things personally. Still, there was something unsettling about the way these two watched her move around the cabin. Their eyes followed her every step, and when she returned with their drinks, they exchanged knowing glances, whispering just loudly enough for her to hear fragments of their conversation. "Look at those shoes," one muttered under his breath, chuckling quietly. "Doesn't exactly scream professional, does it?" The other snickered in agreement. "Yeah, maybe they should stick to serving peanuts instead of trying too hard." Maya felt a pang of hurt but forced herself to remain composed. She handed them their drinks with a polite, "Here you go, gentlemen," refusing to let their words affect her demeanor. Inside, however, she couldn't help but feel frustrated. It wasn't the first time she'd faced such comments, but that didn't make it any easier. She wondered if they even realized how condescending they sounded, or if they cared. Despite their rudeness, Maya continued attending to the other passengers, making sure everyone was comfortable. She chatted briefly with a young couple celebrating their honeymoon, checked on an elderly woman traveling alone, and helped a businessman find space for his oversized carry-on. Each interaction reminded her why she loved her job, connecting with people even if only for a short while, and making their journey smoother. But the two men in the corner remained a constant source of irritation. Every time she passed by, they seemed to find another reason to criticize her. Whether it was the speed at which she served their drinks, the temperature of their water, or even the way she walked. At one point, one of them snapped his fingers sharply, calling her over with exaggerated impatience. "Excuse me," he said, his tone laced with mockery. "Could you possibly bring me another napkin, or is that too much to ask?" Maya bit her tongue, forcing herself to nod and reply calmly. "Absolutely, sir, I'll be right back." She returned moments later with a fresh napkin, placing it gently on his tray table. "Here you are. Is there anything else I can assist you with?" He glanced at her briefly, then shook his head without so much as a thank you. The other man chuckled softly, clearly amused by his friend's behavior. Though outwardly calm, Maya couldn't ignore the growing knot of frustration in her stomach. She knew better than to confront them directly. It wouldn't solve anything and might only escalate the situation. Instead, she focused on maintaining her professionalism, reminding herself that their opinions didn't define her worth. As the plane prepared for takeoff, Maya double-checked seatbelts and ensured all trays were securely stowed. The engines roared to life and the aircraft began its ascent into the sky. For a brief moment, the cabin fell silent, the hum of the engines drowning out the earlier unpleasantness. Maya allowed herself a small sigh of relief, hoping the rest of the flight would pass without further incident. But deep down, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. There was an unease lingering in the air, as if the universe itself was hinting that this flight wouldn't follow the usual script. Little did anyone know, the events about to unfold would test not only Maya's skills, but also the character of everyone on board, including the two mocking passengers, whose judgmental attitudes were about to collide with a reality far beyond their expectations. The flight had been cruising smoothly for about an hour when the first signs of trouble began to emerge. The skies, which had initially been clear and calm, suddenly darkened as thick clouds rolled in. Passengers glanced out their windows watching, as streaks of lightning illuminated the horizon. A low rumble of thunder echoed in the distance, growing louder with each passing second. The atmosphere inside the cabin shifted almost imperceptibly at first. Nervous murmurs rippled through the rows of seats, but most people tried to brush it off. After all, turbulence was a common occurrence during flights, wasn't it? Maya, ever vigilant, noticed the change immediately. She moved swiftly up and down the aisles, ensuring that everyone's tray tables were stowed and seatbelts securely fastened. Her voice remained steady and reassuring as she reminded passengers to stay calm. Just a bit of weather ahead, she said with a smile, her tone light and confident. We'll be through it in no time. But deep down, Maya could sense that this was more than just a routine patch of turbulence. The plane began to shake, slightly, a gentle rocking motion that quickly escalated into violent jolts. Drinks spilled onto laps, books tumbled from hands, and overhead compartments rattled ominously. Panic spread like wildfire as the aircraft bounced unpredictably, sending waves of fear coursing through the cabin. Amidst the chaos, a sharp cry pierced the air. It came from a young boy sitting near the front of the first-class section. He clutched his throat, his face turning red as he struggled to breathe. His mother, frantic and wide-eyed, leapt to her feet, shouting for help. "Please, someone help! My son!" she screamed, her voice cracking with desperation. The commotion drew immediate attention. Nearby, passengers turned to see what was happening, some gasping in shock while others froze, unsure of what to do. The two mocking men, who had spent much of the flight ridiculing Maya, exchanged glances. One of them rolled his eyes dismissively, muttering under his breath, "Great, just what we needed, a kid having a meltdown." But Maya didn't hesitate. Years of experience had taught her to act decisively in emergencies, and she sprang into action without missing a beat. Rushing to the boy's side, she knelt beside him, her movements calm, yet urgent. "Ma'am, tell me what happened," she asked the boy's mother, her voice firm but soothing. "He ate something. He must have had an allergic reaction." The woman sobbed, clutching her son's hand tightly. "I think it was peanuts. Oh God, please, help him." Without wasting another second, Maya grabbed the emergency medical kit stored nearby and opened it with practiced efficiency. She pulled out an EpiPen and carefully administered it to the boy, explaining each step to his terrified mother. "This will help stabilize him," she said, her tone reassuring despite the storm raging both outside and inside the plane. "We need to keep him calm and monitor his breathing." As she worked, the turbulence grew worse. The plane lurched violently, throwing loose items across the cabin and causing several passengers to scream. People clung to their armrests or buried their faces in their hands, praying silently for the nightmare to end. Yet amidst the pandemonium, Maya remained a pillar of strength. Her focus never wavered as she monitored the boy's condition, speaking softly to reassure him and his mother. "Breathe slowly, sweetheart," she encouraged the child, placing a comforting hand on his shoulder. "You're going to be okay." Slowly but surely, the boy's breathing began to stabilize. His color returned, and though he still looked shaken, the immediate danger seemed to have passed. His mother broke into tears of relief, gripping Maya's arm tightly. "Thank you," she whispered hoarsely, her voice trembling with gratitude. "You saved him." While the situation appeared to be under control, the turbulence showed no signs of letting up. The captain's voice crackled over the intercom, cutting through the noise of the frightened passengers. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are experiencing severe weather conditions," he announced, his tone clipped but professional. "Our team is working hard to navigate us safely through this. Please remain seated with your seatbelts fastened." Despite the reassurance, anxiety continued to grip the cabin. Passengers exchanged worried glances, some whispering prayers while others sat rigid with fear. Even the two mocking men who had earlier dismissed Maya with disdain now watched her with a mixture of curiosity and unease. They couldn't ignore the fact that she had handled the crisis with remarkable composure, her actions speaking volumes about her competence and dedication. Yet what truly caught their attention, and the attention of many others on board, was the way Maya carried herself. There was something different about her, something they hadn't noticed before. It wasn't just her ability to stay calm under pressure. It was the authority with which she commanded the situation, the confidence in her every move. For the first time, the two men found themselves questioning their earlier assumptions about her. Had they misjudged her? Was there more to this flight attendant than met the eye? As the minutes ticked by, the turbulence began to ease slightly, offering a brief reprieve. But the respite was short-lived. Another sudden jolt sent the plane lurching sideways, eliciting fresh screams from the passengers. This time, however, the source of the disturbance wasn't the weather. It was something far more alarming. An ominous grinding sound reverberated through the fuselage, followed by the unmistakable sensation of the aircraft losing altitude. Panic erupted anew as passengers realized the gravity of the situation. Some began shouting questions, demanding answers from the crew. Others simply held on to their loved ones, bracing for the worst. In the midst of the hysteria, Maya stood tall, her expression unwavering. She knew that panic would only make things worse, and she refused to let fear take hold. Not for herself, and certainly not for the passengers who depended on her. Her mind raced as she assessed the situation. The pilots were doing everything they could to regain control, but the plane's erratic movement suggested that they were struggling. If the situation didn't improve soon, they might be forced to attempt an emergency landing, a daunting prospect given the severity of the Kotham storm. It was then that Maya made a decision. She couldn't stand idly by while chaos consumed the cabin. Drawing on every ounce of training and experience she possessed, she stepped forward and addressed the passengers directly. Her voice cut through the noise like a beacon of hope, commanding attention without raising its volume. "Everyone, please listen to me," she said firmly, her eyes scanning the frightened faces around her. "I know this is scary, but I need you to stay calm. We're going to get through this together. Follow my instructions and we'll make sure everyone stays safe." Her words had an immediate effect. Though fear still lingered in the air, a sense of order began to return. Passengers nodded, clinging to her assurance like a lifeline. Even the two mocking men, who had once scoffed at her abilities, now stared at her with newfound respect. Whatever doubts they'd harbored about her earlier were replaced by a dawning realization. Maya was no ordinary flight attendant, and unbeknownst to anyone on board, the true extent of her capabilities was about to be revealed. The plane's descent was far from smooth, and the cabin remained tense. Passengers clung to their seats, some whispering prayers while others sat in stunned silence, gripping their armrests as if holding on for dear life. The storm outside raged, on lightning illuminating the darkened sky in flashes that sent shivers down everyone's spines. Inside, the mood had shifted dramatically. Fear hung heavy in the air. But amidst the chaos, Maya stood out like a beacon of calm. Her presence alone seemed to steady nerves, even as the aircraft groaned under the strain of its fight against the elements. Despite her outward composure, Maya knew the situation was dire. The grinding sound earlier hadn't subsided. It had only grown louder, signaling mechanical issues that could spell disaster if not addressed quickly. She glanced toward the cockpit door, wondering how the pilots were faring. Were they able to regain control? Or were they struggling just as much as the passengers were? Her instincts kicked into high gear. Over her years as a flight attendant, Maya had trained extensively for emergencies, learning protocols designed to handle everything from medical crises to catastrophic failures. But this wasn't just about following procedures anymore. It was about survival. And deep inside, she realized that the skills she'd acquired long before joining the airline might be the key to getting everyone through this alive. Years ago, Maya's life had taken a very different path. Before she became a flight attendant, she served in the military, a fact known only to a handful of colleagues at the airline. During her time in uniform, she specialized as a combat medic, a role that required her to think fast and act decisively under extreme pressure. Whether treating soldiers injured in battle or stabilizing civilians caught in conflict zones, Maya had faced situations far more harrowing than anything most people could imagine. Those experiences had forged her into someone who thrived in moments of crisis, someone capable of leading when others faltered. Now, standing in the middle of a turbulent flight with frightened passengers looking to her for guidance, Maya felt those old instincts resurfacing. She took a deep breath, centering herself, and began issuing clear instructions. "Stay seated and keep your seatbelts fastened," she called out, her voice firm yet reassuring. "If you're traveling with children, hold them close and protect their heads." Her words carried authority, cutting through the panic and giving people something concrete to focus on. As she moved through the cabin, checking on passengers and offering words of encouragement, one man raised his hand hesitantly. "What's happening?" he asked, his voice trembling. "Are we going to crash?" Maya paused beside him, meeting his gaze with unwavering calm. "We're doing everything we can to ensure a safe landing," she replied honestly. "The pilots are working hard to stabilize the plane, and I'm here to help you stay safe until then. Trust me, we've got this." Her response seemed to ease his fears slightly, though the worry in his eyes lingered. Satisfied that he was as comfortable as possible given the circumstances, Maya continued her rounds. Each step brought her closer to the cockpit, and with every moment that passed, her resolve strengthened. If the pilots needed assistance, or, worse, if something happened to them, she knew she might have to step up in ways no one expected. When she reached the front of the plane, she stopped near the galley and pulled out her phone, quickly reviewing emergency checklists stored in an app provided by the airline. While most passengers assumed flight attendants were simply there to serve food and drinks, the truth was far more complex. Flight attendants underwent rigorous training, including simulations for scenarios exactly like this one. They learned how to communicate with pilots, assist in evacuations, and even provide basic navigation support if necessary. But Maya's knowledge went beyond standard training. Her background as a combat medic included advanced first aid techniques, stress management strategies, and even rudimentary piloting skills. She'd never imagined needing to use those skills in civilian life, but now they felt like a lifeline, not just for herself, but for everyone on board. Summoning her courage, Maya approached the cockpit door and knocked firmly. After a brief pause, the co-pilot's voice crackled over the intercom system. "Who is it?" "It's Maya," she replied, keeping her tone professional. "I need to speak with you about the situation." There was another pause, longer this time, before the door clicked open. Maya stepped inside, closing it behind her to shield the passengers from further distress. What she saw inside shocked her. Both pilots were visibly strained, sweat dripping from their foreheads as they wrestled with the controls. Alarms blared intermittently, and the dashboard lights flickered erratically. It was clear they were fighting to keep the plane airborne, but the odds were stacked against them. "What's the status?" Maya asked, her voice steady despite the turmoil around her. "We're losing altitude," the captain admitted grimly, his hands gripping the yoke tightly. "One of our engines is failing, and we're struggling to maintain stability. We're trying to find a safe place to land, but the storm is making visibility nearly impossible." Maya nodded, absorbing the information without hesitation. "Let me help," she said firmly. "I have experience in high-pressure environments, and I know how to navigate emergencies like this." For a split second, the pilots exchanged skeptical glances. A flight attendant stepping in to assist? It sounded almost absurd, but desperation left little room for pride, and they couldn't afford to turn away any help. Reluctantly, the co-pilot gestured for her to take a seat at the auxiliary console. "All right," he said tersely, his voice tinged with uncertainty. "Tell us what you know." Without wasting a moment, Maya sprang into action. Drawing on her military training, she began guiding the pilots through a series of troubleshooting steps, helping them prioritize tasks and allocate resources effectively. She suggested adjustments to their flight path, recommending routes that avoided the worst of the storm, while keeping them within range of potential landing sites. When communication with air traffic control became garbled due to interference, Maya used her expertise to clarify messages and relay critical updates. Back in the cabin, passengers noticed a subtle change in the plane's behavior. Though the turbulence persisted, the violent jolts began to subside, replaced by a steadier, if still uneven, descent. Whispers spread among the rows, speculating about what was happening up front. Some credited divine intervention, while others wondered if the pilots had finally regained control. No one realized that part of the credit belonged to Maya, whose calm demeanor and quick thinking were literally keeping the plane aloft. Meanwhile, the two mocking men watched silently from their seats, their earlier arrogance replaced by a mixture of awe and shame. They had mocked Maya for being just a flight attendant, dismissing her as nothing more than a glorified server. Now, seeing her emerge as a leader in the face of catastrophe, they couldn't help but feel humbled. One of them leaned over to his companion, speaking softly so as not to be overheard. "Do you think maybe we misjudged her?" he murmured, his tone uncharacteristically hesitant. His friend sighed heavily, nodding slowly. "Yeah," he admitted. "Looks like we did." By the time Maya returned to the cabin, the tension had eased slightly. The plane was still descending, but the worst of the turbulence had passed. Passengers looked up as she walked down the aisle, their expressions reflecting a mix of gratitude and admiration. Some even applauded quietly, though Maya waved off the praise with a modest smile. "There's still work to do," she reminded them gently. "Stay focused, and we'll get through this together." Behind her, the two men exchanged another glance, this time filled with regret. They didn't say anything aloud, but their body language spoke volumes. For the first time since boarding the flight, they truly understood the depth of Maya's character and the magnitude of their own mistakes. As the plane continued its descent, Maya felt a renewed sense of purpose. This wasn't just about saving lives anymore. It was about proving that strength and resilience came in many forms, and sometimes heroes wore uniforms you least expected. The descent was far from smooth, but Maya's presence in the cockpit had made a noticeable difference. With her guidance, the pilots managed to stabilize the plane just enough to prevent it from spiraling out of control. The storm outside still raged, lightning illuminating the dark clouds in jagged bursts while rain battered the windows with relentless force. Inside, however, there was a growing sense of hope, fragile but palpable, as passengers began to believe that they might actually survive this harrowing ordeal. Maya returned to the cabin after ensuring the pilots were on track for an emergency landing. She moved through the aisles once again, checking on each passenger individually. Her calm demeanor and reassuring words continued to steady nerves, even as the plane shuddered violently every few minutes. When she reached the young boy who had suffered the allergic reaction earlier, his mother grabbed her hand tightly, tears streaming down her face. "Thank you," the woman whispered hoarsely, her voice trembling with emotion. "You saved my son's life not once but twice now." Maya smiled softly, giving the woman's hand a gentle squeeze. "It's what I'm here for," she replied simply, though her humility only deepened the gratitude radiating from the mother. As she worked her way toward the front of the plane, Maya approached the two mocking men who had ridiculed her earlier. They sat stiffly in their seats, their expressions unreadable but undeniably different from before. Gone was the smug arrogance. Instead, they looked uneasy, almost contrite. One of them cleared his throat awkwardly as Maya stopped beside them. "Is there anything I can do to make you more comfortable?" she asked, her tone polite yet firm, leaving no room for further mockery. The man hesitated, glancing at his companion before speaking. No, we're fine," he stammered, avoiding eye contact. Then after a beat he added quietly, And, uh, thank you for everything. It wasn't much, a fleeting acknowledgement, but it carried weight. Maya nodded once, accepting the apology without judgment. There would be time later to reflect on their behavior, but right now, her focus remained squarely on getting everyone safely to the ground. Back in the cockpit, the situation was improving incrementally but remained precarious. The failing engine sputtered intermittently, threatening to give out completely, while crosswinds buffeted the aircraft as it descended. Despite these challenges, the pilots, with Maya's assistance, were able to maintain partial control. Using her knowledge of navigation systems, Maya helped identify a nearby airport equipped to handle emergency landings. It wasn't ideal. The runway was shorter than recommended for such a large plane, but it was their best option given the circumstances. "We'll need to prepare the cabin for impact," the captain said grimly, addressing Maya over his shoulder. "Even if we manage to touch down safely, the landing is going to be rough." Maya nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation. Returning to the cabin, she gathered the other flight attendants and quickly briefed them. Together, they began instructing passengers on how to brace for impact, demonstrating the proper position: heads down, hands clasped behind necks, feet flat on the floor. Their voices were calm but urgent, emphasizing the importance of following instructions to minimize injury. "Ladies and gentlemen," Maya announced over the intercom, her voice cutting through the tense silence, "we are preparing for an emergency landing. Please listen carefully to the instructions provided by the crew. Your safety is our top priority, and we will get through this together." Her words resonated throughout the cabin, instilling a renewed sense of trust among the passengers. Even those who had been skeptical or fearful earlier now looked to her as a source of strength. Strangers exchanged nods of encouragement, forming an unspoken bond forged by shared adversity. For the first time since the turbulence began, the atmosphere shifted, not to one of complete calm but to something closer to unity. As the plane drew nearer to the airport, Maya took a moment to address the entire cabin directly. Standing near the galley, she scanned the rows of faces, meeting as many eyes as possible. "I want to thank all of you for staying strong during this difficult time," she said, her voice warm yet commanding. "We face some challenges, but we're almost there. Remember to stay focused and follow our instructions. You've got this." Her speech elicited murmurs of agreement and quiet applause, a testament to the respect she had earned. Even the two mocking men joined in, clapping softly as they avoided her gaze. In that moment, Maya didn't see them as adversaries or critics. She saw them as human beings, flawed like anyone else but capable of growth. Her ability to forgive and move forward inspired others to do the same. With the runway in sight, the pilots initiated the final approach. The plane rocked violently as it fought against the wind, its wheels groaning under the strain of deployment. Passengers braced themselves, gripping seat backs and burying faces in laps. Some whispered prayers aloud, while others held loved ones close, clinging to whatever comfort they could find. Maya stood near the front of the cabin, anchoring herself against a wall as she monitored the scene. Her heart pounded in her chest, not from fear but from determination. This was the culmination of everything she had trained for, both as a flight attendant and as a combat medic. Every decision, every action had led to this moment, and she refused to let anyone down. Finally, with a deafening screech of tires against tarmac, the plane touched down. Sparks flew as the brakes engaged, slowing the aircraft's momentum inch by agonizing inch. The cabin jolted violently, throwing loose items into the air and eliciting screams from startled passengers. But despite the chaos, the plane came to a stop, safe, intact, and surrounded by flashing emergency lights. For several seconds there was silence. Then slowly, the realization dawned. They had made it. Cheers erupted throughout the cabin, followed by applause so thunderous it seemed to shake the very walls of the plane. Strangers hugged one another, tears streaming down cheeks as relief washed over them. Children cried not from fear but from the overwhelming rush of emotions, while adults laughed and sobbed simultaneously. Maya allowed herself a brief moment of satisfaction, letting the weight of what had just transpired sink in. She had done her job, not perfectly perhaps, but with unwavering dedication and courage. And in doing so, she had reminded everyone on board, including herself, that resilience often came from unexpected places. Emergency crews rushed onto the runway surrounding the plane with ambulances and fire trucks. Passengers disembarked one by one, stepping gingerly onto solid ground for the first time in what felt like hours. Many paused to thank the flight attendants and pilots personally, shaking hands and offering hugs. When Maya appeared at the door, helping guide people off the plane, the response was overwhelming. People stopped mid-step to express their gratitude, some bowing slightly in deference to her heroism. Among them were the two mocking men. As they approached her, their earlier bravado replaced by genuine remorse, one of them spoke up. "Miss Maya," he said haltingly, his voice thick with emotion. "We owe you an apology. For everything. We judged you unfairly, and we couldn't have been more wrong. Thank you for saving us." Maya met his gaze evenly, her expression softening. "Apology accepted," she replied simply. "And remember, we're all stronger when we work together." The man nodded, visibly moved before stepping aside to let others pass. Behind him, reporters swarmed the tarmac, eager to capture footage of the miraculous landing. Cameras flashed, microphones extended, and questions flew in rapid succession. Yet through it all, Maya remained composed, deflecting praise and crediting teamwork rather than individual effort. As the last passenger disembarked, Maya turned back to survey the empty cabin. The journey had tested her in ways she hadn't anticipated, but it had also reaffirmed her belief in humanity's capacity for kindness, even in the face of fear and adversity. With a small smile, she closed the door behind her, ready to face whatever came next. The emergency landing had been nothing short of miraculous, and as passengers stepped off the plane onto the tarmac, they were greeted by a scene straight out of a Hollywood movie. Emergency vehicles surrounded the aircraft, their flashing lights, casting an eerie yet comforting glow in the dim evening air. Paramedics rushed aboard to tend to those who needed medical attention, while firefighters stood ready in case any complications arose. The storm that had battered the plane during its descent had finally begun to subside, leaving behind a damp chill that clung to everyone's skin. For many passengers, simply being on solid ground again felt like a second chance at life. Some collapsed onto their knees, overcome with emotion, while others hugged strangers or called loved ones to let them know they were safe. The young boy Maya had saved earlier clung tightly to his mother's hand, tears streaming down his face, not from fear this time, but from relief. His mother approached Maya once more, her gratitude overflowing as she wrapped her arms around the flight attendant in a heartfelt embrace. "You saved my son's life," she repeated, her voice breaking. "I don't know how I'll ever repay you." Maya smiled gently, patting the woman's back. "Just take care of him," she said softly. "That's all the thanks I need." As word spread about Maya's role in stabilizing the boy and assisting, the pilots, reporters stationed near the runway zeroed in on her immediately. Cameras flashed wildly, capturing every step she took as she guided passengers off the plane. Microphones were thrust toward her face and questions came rapid fire. "What happened up there? How did you manage to keep everyone calm? Did you really help the pilots land the plane?" Maya handled the media frenzy with the same grace and professionalism she'd shown throughout the entire ordeal. She spoke calmly, deflecting praise and emphasizing teamwork. "This wasn't just me, it was a collective effort," she explained, gesturing to the flight crew and passengers behind her. "Everyone played a part in getting us safely to the ground. I'm just grateful we're all here to tell the story." Despite her humility, it was impossible for anyone to ignore the central role she had played. Passengers eagerly recounted her actions to journalists, describing how she had taken charge during the crisis, administered first aid to the boy, and even communicated with the cockpit when things seemed most dire. One elderly woman told reporters, "She didn't panic, not once. She was like a rock for all of us." Another passenger added, "If it weren't for her, I don't think we'd be standing here right now." Even the two mocking men whose earlier behavior had cast such a shadow over the flight couldn't stay silent. As they waited to board buses that would transport survivors to the terminal, both men approached Maya hesitantly, their expressions a mix of shame and admiration. "Can we talk to you for a moment?" one of them asked quietly, glancing around nervously as if afraid someone might overhear. Maya nodded, stepping aside so they could speak privately. "Of course." The taller of the two cleared his throat, visibly struggling to find the right words. We owe you an apology," he began haltingly. "We treated you horribly at the start of the flight, like you were less than us. And honestly, we couldn't have been more wrong. What you did today, it proves exactly how wrong we were." His companion chimed in, nodding emphatically. "You're not just a flight attendant, you're a hero. We judged you based on appearances, and that was unfair. If anyone deserves respect, it's you." Maya listened patiently, her expression unreadable. When they finished speaking, she took a deep breath before responding. "Thank you for saying that," she said evenly. "Apologies aren't easy, especially in front of cameras and reporters. But what matters most is that you've learned something from this experience. Everyone makes mistakes, including me, but owning up to them is the first step toward change." Her response left the two men speechless. They exchanged glances, clearly moved by her willingness to forgive, despite their earlier cruelty. After a long pause, the shorter man muttered, "You're amazing, truly." With that, they stepped away, leaving Maya alone amidst the chaos. Though their apology brought some closure, she knew the real work lay ahead, not for herself, but for society as a whole. Moments like this highlighted the pervasive biases people carried, often without realizing it. But perhaps, she thought, stories like hers could spark meaningful conversations about respect, equality, and understanding. Meanwhile, reporters continued to swarm the area, eager to document every detail of the dramatic landing. A local news anchor conducted live interviews with passengers, capturing raw emotions as people recounted their harrowing journey. One businessman described the turbulence as the scariest thing I've ever experienced, while a young couple shared how they prayed together, vowing never to take each other for granted again. Each story painted a vivid picture of the terror and eventual triumph that unfolded aboard the flight. When it came time for Maya to give her official statement, she chose her words carefully. Standing under the glare of television lights, she addressed the crowd with poise and sincerity. "Today was a reminder that life is unpredictable," she began, her voice steady but tinged with emotion. "In moments of crisis, we rely on each other, not just our skills or training, but our humanity. Every person on that plane contributed to our survival, whether by staying calm, following instructions, or simply offering support to those around them." She paused, scanning the sea of faces before continuing. "For me, this experience reinforced why I chose this profession. It's not just about serving meals or making sure seats are comfortable. It's about caring for people. Whether you're flying coach or first class, we're all human beings sharing the same sky. And when challenges arise, we rise together." Her words resonated deeply, drawing applause from bystanders and even a few cheers from fellow crew members. Reporters scribbled furiously in their notebooks, eager to capture every nuance of her message. By the time she finished speaking, social media was already ablaze with posts praising her courage and leadership. Hashtags like Flight Hero and Sky Savior began trending within minutes, turning Maya into an overnight sensation. Back at the terminal, the airline's management team wasted no time recognizing Maya's extraordinary efforts. Executives arrived, personally to commend her, presenting her with a certificate of valor and announcing plans to promote her to a senior leadership position within the company. "Maya represents the very best of what we strive to be as an organization," one executive stated during a brief press conference. "Her bravery, quick thinking, and compassion saved countless lives today, and we're honored to have her as part of our team." Passengers joined in celebrating her achievements, flooding the airline's social media pages with messages of gratitude. Many demanded that Maya receive formal recognition beyond the company, suggesting awards or honors for her heroic actions. Others pledged to travel exclusively with the airline in the future, citing Maya's example as proof of its commitment to excellence. But for Maya, the accolades mattered less than the impact her story might have on others. She hoped it would inspire people to look beyond surface-level judgments and appreciate the value each individual brought to the table. To her, the true victory wasn't fame or recognition. It was the knowledge that she had made a difference, however small, in the lives of those around her. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a golden glow across the airport, Maya found a quiet corner to reflect on the day's events. Exhaustion weighed heavily on her shoulders, but her heart swelled with gratitude. Despite the fear, the danger, and the prejudice she faced, she had emerged stronger, not because of what she achieved alone, but because of the unity and resilience shown by everyone involved. And as she gazed out at the runway, watching emergency crews dismantle equipment and clean up debris, Maya allowed herself a small smile. Today had tested her in ways she never imagined, but it had also reaffirmed her faith in humanity's capacity for kindness, forgiveness, and growth. Whatever tomorrow held, she knew she was ready to face it, one flight at a time. In the days that followed the emergency landing, Maya's story dominated headlines around the world. News outlets couldn't get enough of her heroics, how she had saved a child's life, guided the pilots through a turbulent descent, and kept an entire plane of passengers calm under unimaginable pressure. Social media was flooded with posts praising her courage and professionalism, turning her into an international symbol of resilience and grace. Memes featuring her image popped up, online, accompanied by captions like, "When life gets bumpy, be like Maya," or "The real captain of the plane." It was overwhelming at times, but Maya handled the attention with the same humility that had defined her actions on the flight. Despite the whirlwind of media coverage, Maya remained grounded. She continued to go about her daily routine as best she could, reporting for work at the airline and performing her duties with the same dedication she always had. Her colleagues greeted her with hugs and congratulations, proud to call her their co-worker. Passengers who recognized her from the news often stopped to thank her personally, some even asking for photos or autographs. While Maya appreciated the kind words, she never let the praise inflate her ego. To her, she had simply done her job, and done it well. The airline, eager to capitalize on the positive publicity, launched a campaign highlighting Maya's heroism. They released videos featuring interviews with passengers from the flight, testimonials from co-workers, and footage of Maya speaking at press conferences. The tagline read, "Heroes fly with us." Posters bearing her smiling face appeared in airports worldwide, alongside messages encouraging travelers to show kindness and respect to flight crews. For the first time, Maya found herself thrust into the spotlight, not just as a flight attendant, but as a role model. While the public celebrated Maya, the two mocking men from the flight grappled with their own emotions. Back home, they struggled to shake off the guilt of how they'd treated her. One evening, sitting across from each other over drinks, they revisited the events of that fateful day. "I can't stop thinking about it," the taller man admitted, swirling his glass absent-mindedly. "We were so awful to her, and look at what she did for us, for everyone." His friend nodded solemnly. "Yeah, I've been replaying it in my head too. She didn't have to forgive us, but she did. That takes strength." Determined to make amends, they decided to take action. The next morning, one of them penned an op-ed for a major newspaper, recounting their experience and acknowledging their shameful behavior. Titled "What I Learned from Mocking a Hero," the piece went viral almost instantly. In it, he described how his prejudice blinded him to Maya's humanity and urged readers to examine their own biases. "It's easy to judge someone based on appearances or assumptions," he wrote, "but real character is revealed when it matters most. Maya showed me that, and I'll carry that lesson with me forever." The second man took a different approach. Inspired by Maya's compassion, he donated a significant portion of his wealth to organizations promoting diversity and inclusion in aviation. He reached out to groups supporting women and minorities in the industry, offering not only financial backing but also volunteering his time to mentor aspiring pilots and flight attendants. When asked why he chose this cause, he replied simply, Maya reminded me that talent and bravery come in all forms. If I can help create opportunities for others like her, maybe I can start to make things right. For Maya, these gestures came as a surprise, but not entirely unexpected. She understood that growth often stemmed from uncomfortable truths, and she admired their willingness to confront their mistakes openly. Though she never sought validation or revenge, seeing them take responsibility gave her hope that change was possible. People weren't defined solely by their worst moments. They were capable of learning, growing, and becoming better versions of themselves. As weeks turned into months, Maya's life began to settle into a new rhythm. Promoted to a leadership role within the airline, she now oversaw training programs for incoming flight attendants. Drawing from her military background, she emphasized crisis management, teamwork, and empathy in her teachings. Her classes became legendary among trainees, who marveled at her ability to blend discipline with warmth. "She doesn't just teach you how to handle emergencies," one student said. "She teaches you how to care for your passengers, for your team, and for yourself." Beyond her professional achievements, Maya's personal life flourished as well. Strangers reached out to share how her story had inspired them to overcome challenges in their own lives. A young girl wrote to say she wanted to become a pilot after hearing about Maya's bravery. A retired teacher sent a heartfelt letter thanking her for reminding him of the importance of forgiveness. Even former critics of the aviation industry praised her for restoring faith in its workers. Through it all, Maya remained humble, deflecting credit onto the people around her. One crisp autumn morning, Maya stood on the tarmac once again, watching as another plane taxied toward the gate. The sun hung low in the sky, painting everything in hues of orange and pink. As she gazed upward, she felt a profound sense of peace. Flying had always been her passion, a way to connect with people from all walks of life and explore the vastness of the world. But now it meant something more. It wasn't just about destinations or schedules. It was about moments of transformation, both big and small. That day, as she boarded her next flight, Maya carried with her not just the memories of survival, but also the lessons learned along the way. She knew that every journey brought challenges, and every challenge offered an opportunity to grow. Whether calming anxious passengers, mentoring new recruits, or simply offering a smile to someone having a tough day, she embraced each task with purpose and heart. And so Maya's story became more than just a tale of heroism. It became a testament to the power of resilience, compassion, and second chances. For the passengers who lived through that harrowing flight, she would always be a beacon of hope. For the two men who once mocked her, she represented redemption and the possibility of change. And for herself, Maya embodied the belief that no matter how turbulent life got, there was always a way to rise above it, together. With a final glance at the horizon, Maya stepped aboard the plane, ready to write the next chapter of her journey.